If you're an American conservative, you know that the societal values we hold sacred are under attack. They are hanging in the balance. How can you protect those values? By staying informed. The Closing Argument will deliver news and supporting evidence you need to support and defend those values. Here's Paul Smith.
Good morning. This is Paul Smith. Welcome to The Closing Argument. In this podcast, we discuss some of the important but controversial moral, political, and legal issues that affect us and our families today. And today we're going to talk about capitalism and socialism. I have with me for my guest, my good friend who we're going to call Rodney from New Windsor. How are you, Rodney?
I'm fine today.
So those of you who are from Frederick, Maryland and listen to talk radio will know Rodney, the beloved conservative from New Windsor, who is has great comments all the time. Now, I published a book a couple of years ago called The Capitalism Argument. I've got a copy of it here, and Rodney and I are going to talk about it. It's not very long. It's about, looks like it's about 80 pages. And I first published it during before the Democrats had decided on their nominee. My purpose was to educate as many people as I could. So I kept it short so as not to exceed the attention span of those who needed to read it. So what we're going to do, we're going to, first of all, define capitalism and socialism briefly, and then talk about some of the elements of both of them. So are you happy to talk about capitalism and socialism?
Yes, I am.
We've been talking. We could probably go on for an hour. We're going to try to keep this concise. So why don't you, if you can, define capitalism and then define socialism? Let me see if I agree with your definition.
Well, my definition of capitalism to me, is what I call free enterprise. People are allowed to do what they want to do or not do what they don't want to do, and they are rewarded based on what they're willing to do. And socialism is basically everybody is the same, which we know isn't the case, because anytime you look in the mirror, that becomes very obvious. I could point at sports athletes that I could never do what they do. And I can cite some of those same athletes without insulting them. It couldn't do anything close to what I can do in other areas.
Well, that's good. Now, one reason I want to talk about this is because capitalism is given a very bad name and is demonized by the socialists today. And even some people who actually believe in capitalism are sometimes reluctant to defend it. I want to make it very clear. The capitalistic system is the greatest system. It is a system of freedom. And if you want freedom, you're going to have capitalism. If you're happy not having freedom, I guess you can go to China or somewhere else where they don't have freedom. But freedom is the essence of it.
Well, I guess my argument would be, if for those who think socialism is better, to cite any country, and there's plenty of them out there that are much older than we are, because we're 248 years old since we separated from England, that have accomplished as much as America has accomplished in the short time, 248 years, with as few people as they have. And show me that socialist country, any socialist country, that can even come close to comparison.
Right. Now, in terms of a title or topic of socialism, in the early 1800s, people began to talk about it, and it seemed to have some enamor to some pseudo-educated people, I will say. Basically, it's sharing and it's like share the wealth and so forth. But as we're going to discuss, there are a couple of problems with an economic system that mandates socialism. First of all, we talked about freedom. Let's talk about one freedom in particular, the ownership of property. In socialism, you don't own property. You're just given what someone thinks you need. And the other aspect of that is, if you were to produce something, it's not yours. Whatever you produce is someone else's. So socialism robs the individual of incentive to work. And ultimately, the reason the United States has become so great, in my opinion, is the combination. It does have a lot of good natural resources, but the system that we have, the economic system, is free enterprise, and it gives us the right to have the fruits of our labors, the law of the harvest, so to speak, as well as the blessings for our creativity and ingenuity and dedication. So now you mentioned history. We're not going to take a lot of time going into the history. Probably the birth of modern socialism was probably when Marx came up with his manifesto and wanted to promote this. There are a couple of interesting things about it, though. Marx loved war and revolution, and he also rejected a belief in God.
Well, I was going to say that, Paul. Most socialists are what I call atheists. They don't believe in a supreme being. And I still go back to the fact that you mentioned earlier, socialism has been tried in this country. If it was so great, why didn't it work? It hadn't worked in any of the enterprises that I'm aware of.
It sure hasn't. I mean, we don't have to look back too far when the Soviet Union came apart in 1989. You and I would live through that. Maybe some of our listeners didn't, but socialism, it just collapsed economically, and the socialism in Venezuela collapsed fairly recently. Well, and that was a wealthy nation for a period of time.
Well, the Iron Lady said it best, Margaret Thatcher. This is her line, not mine. Her point was socialism always works till you run out of other people's money.
Exactly.
I never forgot that line because it's like, thank you, madam.
So what we have in the United States is, frankly, in my opinion, it is popular to embrace socialism and to condemn capitalism, but I don't think the students who are taught this fully understand it. Because if they did, you cannot intellectually argue how great socialism is. It always falls apart.
Well, I would ask these students to do what I thought of that I heard professors do. If you think socialism is so great, when you take a test and you get your test papers back, share some of the points if you got an A with the students that got Fs and see if you appreciate socialism at that point.
Right. It's only fair, huh?
It's only fair that everybody get an equal part, even if they didn't participate or study or anything. I mean, socialism is only great in a theoretical sense, and unfortunately, humans aren't all alike. We have people that are willing to work 24 hours a day, and we have people that don't want to work 24 hours a month.
So in capitalism, someone can become rich, but that's the reason people like to come here, because they want that opportunity to become rich. Now, I'm not rich yet, but I've done okay, and I like the opportunity.
I'm not rich either. And in fact, I've had that discussions on our radio station too. I grew up, and my mother, she came through the Depression. She had to quit school in 7th grade to go to work for full time. So she always told us as kids, I don't have school education, academic education, but I have common sense, which isn't so common. I would see a lot of people work their whole lives, and we have them right around us now. I can name them: Bill Gates, Forbes, Elon Musk, Bloomberg. All these people, they couldn't spend all the money they have right now if they stopped doing everything and tried to spend their money. They spend their whole lives making the money. They die. Some will leave it to charity. Some will leave it to the children. What's the sense other than it's a real life game of Monopoly, and it's no real rewards at the end, because when you play Monopoly, you're not any better off when the game ends.
Well, let me just put a little side note in there. We're in April of 2022. And so yesterday, the news was that Elon Musk has now the largest shareholder in Twitter, I believe.
Yes.
And so that is a big deal to me, because this guy speaks out and says what he wants, and he isn't silenced. But Twitter has been silencing conservatives and has been silencing people who support capitalism.
I agree with you. And for that respect, I have gained more respect for Elon Musk, because his opposing view of that is a guy named Bill Gates, who I never had respect for from a technical standpoint, because I'm a technical person, but he was very good at marketing. And some of the things that he has done, I mean, his wealth all comes because of capitalism. Would have never happened under socialism, yet the things he pushed It's not for his family. It's only for us, what I call serfs.
Well, let's mention something, a flaw that people say exists in capitalism, and that is that there are poor people and that capitalism impoverishes people and doesn't take care of the poor. What do you what's your answer to that?
Capitalism does take care of the poor from the standpoint, I have never seen anybody in this country starve to death unless they did it themselves. There's homeless people. We in America do more for our disadvantaged people than any other country that I know of. It definitely doesn't happen over in China. It doesn't happen in Russia. It never happened down in Cuba. And if you believe in socialism, in what we call Venezuela, cite me the successes of socialism. I want to know where they're at.
We have in the United States a lot of people that help others. I don't know that there's any nation that can hold a candle to us. Nonprofits coming out your ears, and the people are good. They want to help others. So, and
we have the ordinary citizen helping others. You go in this country, we got poor people.
And churches helping others.
And churches help others. All religions help others pretty much. But I'll drive through Frederick. I see these people standing out on street corners and stuff begging for money. I personally will give to them because of my religious beliefs, because the Bible tells us that we should share with people. And it was my son that taught me this, not me. If I give to somebody that's standing out in the corner, who's a beggar, whatever they are, I've done what Christ has told me to do. If they misuse the money, that's on their shoulders. I've done my part.
Well, the other thing about capitalism is the people who have money, they take risks and they create jobs. And the government has never been good at business. It has proven it is not good at business. And we need these things to be taken care of, business to be developed, and the poor to be taken care of by the private sector as much as possible.
Well, I don't know if you want me to. I can give an example of how the government can't take care of business, and this was close and personal. My son-in-law is a pilot for FedEx. We won't go any further than that. But I do stamp shows. I meet plenty of people. A pilot came to my table. He flies out of Shenandoah Valley on a plane on a government contract to bring people up here to Hagerstown Airport. And I just asked him, as kind of on the side of my table, do you ever fly empty? And his response was simple. He's like, yes, 99% of the time. Why would you fly empty? If we don't fly, the government doesn't pay us. I said, why don't they pay your overhead and your salaries, but you're saving on jet maintenance and you're saving on fuel? He goes, that's not how it works. So he's basically telling me that he's flying, the company is efficient, 1% efficiency, and they're getting paid 100% as if they're 100% efficient. And you notice all the other commercial airlines that don't have government sits, if they don't have enough people, they don't fly. They'll come and tell you they got mechanical problems.
I wasn't aware of that. That's terrible. That's crazy. But here's two examples that everybody is aware of. When the government took over healthcare with the promise that more people would have it and our prices would go down, just the opposite happened. Everybody's cost for healthcare skyrocketed, and government can't do it.
Most people know that. And the other thing, I don't know if these young people know this, because I worked in the federal government. Something came up where I worked, without going into a lot of details, but it basically violated federal law. And the executive director came to me and he's like, we should do this. And it's like, it violates law. He goes, the federal government doesn't have to obey its own laws. And that shocked me and astounded me. But after further discussions with him, I was able to convince our executive director that we weren't going to look very good in the eyes of our neighboring enterprises if we violated something that they could do where we had the rule that we didn't have to obey. That tells you everything you want to know about the federal government, the fact that they don't have to obey their own laws.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And a good example of that I give you real quick.
Okay.
Can I mention names of politicians?
Sure.
Okay. Nancy Pelosi is one of them. She and her husband literally made over $25 million this year on insider trading on the Moderna virus, the vaccine.